Well, good morning and good evening, Kerri, in Australia. We have certainly been having some fun and games here on Aquarius Rising Africa this morning with our technicalities and emails and echoes and gosh knows what all else. But Kerri, welcome. Always such a pleasure to have you here on Aquarius Rising Africa with your stories to share with us. So, welcome, and I'm really happy we finally got our
I
comms sorted. It was
know.
worse than an Australian rugby match a few minutes ago.
If people only knew what happened, and it's like there's some gremlins. Oh my goodness!
Yeah,
Look
we
at
are. We shall overcome. We shall overcome. Hello, Scotty. Hello, Melody. So good to see you guys. Yeah, our regulars. Welcome, Kerri. And I'm so looking forward to another horrifying but enlightening conversation, no doubt, about the adoptions, birthright, and birth loss, which I want to tell you. I was just saying before we tuned in, just that word gives me a knot in my stomach. And I must have some past life connections to that because my word, it makes me nauseous. So I would love to hear more about that. But also, before we get there, I would love to hear more about your story as well. You know, you've had such a crazy, crazy story and
yeah,
such a crazy experience in this life. And I always say this, and I've said it a million times, and I'll say it another million times. I honor you, men and women, so much for having been through what you've been through and coming out healed to tell the tale is absolutely incredible.
yeah.
So, enough jabbering from me, and over to you, beautiful lady.
Oh, thank you, Chantal. Thanks for having me back. And I can't see exactly who's commenting and who's here, but I've really enjoyed reading a lot of the comments later, and I try to reply to everybody. And like the first time I ever started doing YouTube was with Chantal, like doing an interview, and it's live, everybody. None of the questions are pre-given to me, so Chantal likes to keep me on my toes. I can actually see the expression on your face sometimes when you're like, what? Like, you're really grappling with what I'm telling you. And to me,
Yeah,
that's really indicative of adoption in general. Like, people just don't, they'll never be aware of the complex nature and the trauma of it. And you're hearing it for the first time from someone like myself with a lived experience. And I remember the first interview, and I remember someone commented to you, because you've interviewed people who've had really horrific, really traumatic lives. And I remember someone said to you, Chantal, you're really being affected by what I'm saying, right? And the person noted that. And your response was, pretty out there in the sense you're trying to comprehend what you're hearing. And for me, like, I've heard you do interviews with other people with pretty horrific stuff. And I think it's because that whole narrative around adoption has been sold in such a way with this pretty picture and it's all wonderful, that's an assault to the senses when I
yeah,
tell you that it wasn't like that. Um, we hear,
absolutely.
yeah, I mean, we've heard lots of stories, of people growing up like stranger danger, so if children are abused by strangers, we're not so much as, assaulted by that in a sense. It's still traumatizing, but we've come to kind of expect those sorts of things. But when it comes to adoption, nobody expects that adoptive parents could be abusive or cruel, or that our government was party to selling children, to abusive adoptive parents, or parents who should never have been given children, or into the orphanages then adopted by priests, and then horrible things happen to them. So it is an assault. Adoption, for most adoptees, the word adoption is extremely traumatic. We don't like to see it in the media. We don't like to read stories in the newspaper. about all these movie stars adopting, and because we know what the reality is. We know behind that cascade of the adoptive parents saying, oh, you know, we're going to give this child everything it wouldn't have with its biological parents. We know that no amount of money, no amount of status from the adoptive parents is going to make up for that trauma and loss of your birth and your birthright and your culture and your heritage. It doesn't make up for it. I've met like hundreds of adoptees that will tell you that, you know, regardless of what sort of good life they may have had and the fancy clothes and the nice food and the lovely house, the trauma is almost exactly the same as what I've lived through growing up with abusive adoptive parents.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the thing that I grapple with so much, you know, and I have to remind myself that the people that are perpetuating these traumas on the children are really not human, you know, because for me, it's how do you do that to a child? How do you, I can never wrap my head around the fact that someone has this innocent, vulnerable little person in their power, their care, and they have the ability to turn it one way or the other. And it amazes me, it never ceases to amaze me how many people turn that to the other side. So I think it's really, and as you say, I think just being adopted is traumatic enough, you know. And as you were saying, I think 2 interviews ago when we spoke about the child needing to be close to its mother, especially for the first 10 months, call it a year, you know,
Yeah.
to sort of wean from
Yes.
coming out of the womb, you know, it makes a lot of sense, you know. So that in itself, just that instant separation is traumatic enough. I mean, I know many people who've had beautiful adoptive parents, really loving parents.
Yep.
They had issues around abandonment and rejection, rest
Correct.
assured.
Yes.
So when it comes to this, it just takes it to another level, you know, that whole, the cruelty, the violence, the neglect never
Yeah.
ceases to amaze me. That for me is horrific.
Yeah. They did some studies, and I can't remember exactly what it was, but I saw the footage of it. It was black and white, would have been, you know, around, you know, 50s. And it had these adult men in this sort of cubicle, and they were making sure that they were not getting any stimulation whatsoever. So sight, sound, touch. So they had their eyes covered up, their ears and their hands. They couldn't touch themselves. They just laid there, and they figured out they could actually start to split the brain within 24 to 48 hours of doing that in an adult. And I just immediately took me to children, babies that are taken at birth, unable to be placed on mum's breast, and they're whisked away and hidden in the hospital. And the only time they were touched was to feed them and to change their nappies. And I just think that's a newborn baby. So how many adoptees have the brain split before they get, you know, before they're abused by adoptive parents or neglected or feeling the rejection, or, you know, whether they go on to be sexually abused or whatever within the adoptive family or neighbours or whatever. That I believe a lot of adoptees have already had that split directly at birth, straight at birth. And there may be a number of splits. And, you know, I have conversations with a lot of adoptees, and they talk about dissociating, they talk about not being in their body, you know, or using drugs or alcohol, so that trying to cope. And yet some of them will say, I had really lovely adoptive parents. I don't get why I feel the way I feel. But when they talk to me and I begin to kind of share my journey, and I share a bit of what I understand about what would have happened to us at birth, the aha moment tends to come, and they stop being so hard on themselves, and they begin to look at ways to try and help heal that. You know, I think in a lot of times adoptees will always stay traumatized to a certain extent because it's all pre-verbal, and there needs to be some really intense healing to occur for them to move outside of any traumatic feelings. Because when you're doing with trauma healing, normally, you know, if you're like an adult and you're in a car accident or you're assaulted or whatever, a trauma counselor will take you to a time of pre-trauma to help you through it. So you get to go look at your life before the trauma occurred to help you to understand that you can go back to that, right? But for a newborn baby that's taken at birth, we're born into trauma and it's pre-verbal. So being able to undo that, so to speak, is pretty near impossible.
You know what I found to be particularly helpful in these circumstances is to help people to remember that prior to coming into your body, you have a sacred contract with God or your creator to play or be a certain thing, and I battle to find the right words, play a certain role in this life.
Yeah.
So I must remember, you are not a human being trying to be spiritual. You are a spiritual being having a human experience. You get that? That's very, very profound.
Yeah.
Because then we can remember in spirit, which creates the body. You see, the body is the manifestation of spirit in physical form. When we link to that spiritual truth, we're going to remember that I am just this spirit experiencing this as a part of my growth in a much bigger picture.
Yeah.
Now that in itself, yes.
Yeah. I may have
Sorry?
a different view. I mean, you know, I listen to a lot of people that you interview, and I've heard you speak, and I think it's beautiful that people can kind of bring their own little bit of perspective.
Absolutely.
But when I listen to it, I know that there's the link that binds us together, and that link is God, you know, our creator. And I hear what you're saying. I really get it, because I had a similar experience. I've not shared this publicly, but I had spent time with somebody who does prayer ministry, prayer counseling. And I remember I was really suicidal. I couldn't figure out why. I thought, I've got beautiful kids. I've got, you know, a husband. I've got a great job. And I would find myself, I would drive down off a mountain where I was working, and I just want to pull off over the edge or pull out in front of a truck. I couldn't go over the Gateway Bridge, which is down in Brisbane here, massive big bridge. 3 people did jump off it. I had a terrible time driving over the top of that bridge, because I'd want to pull up, get out, and feel this pull to go over the edge. And I would have to really fight it. And anyway, it just really broke me one day. And I thought, I don't get this. And by then, look, I never really understood what happened to me as a child. I hadn't had all those memories. But I went and saw somebody, and she just said, well, let's have prayer about it. And within minutes, I was basically going through the birth canal. I could feel myself being reborn. But the interesting thing was, and she didn't know any of this, was I really connected with the fact I didn't want to be born, because I knew I was going to be separated from my mother.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, and after the event, like, you know, of that experience, I actually remembered that I was a forceps baby. I had the marks in the side here where they had to grab me and pull me out. So I had a scar on the side here. But it was a real shock to the system to kind of just have prayer, and the next minute you've like, well, this weird physical stuff is happening to you.
Yes.
it made sense, though. It absolutely
Yes.
made sense to what and why I felt the way I did. And it makes you question, how aware are babies in the womb? How aware? Like in my normal, if somebody said this to me without me going through that experience, I would have said, "You're nuts," really. But
I
because
will tell you, sorry, I want to just say, you're talking about the womb there.
yeah.
I have, over the past number of years, developed a treatment, or a treatment called the womb regression.
Okay.
And what I do is I regress my clients back into their mother's womb.
Yeah.
And let me tell you something. I have conscious memory of being in my mother's womb.
Yeah. I do, and I get now. Oh, I do
It's,
now. Yeah.
yeah. So what I'm saying is that fetus, and as you will be aware, is so conscious. It's the full consciousness of spirit that is now coming into that little baby. And that the thing is, when we remember, and that was exactly, I think, the link that I used with a lot of people that have been adopted. And for them to remember, there was one particular guy I worked with, which was very, very interesting. His mom dropped him off at the church door. And he has been a misogynist, a narcissist, very, very wealthy guy, but man, oh man, did he use his to play games. And somehow he found his way to me. And through that process, I did a womb regression with him where he remembered this. And he remembers his mom putting him in front of the church door, or the could have been were the nuns, them.
Okay.
And as he remembers her face, and he remembers how she was crying, and he remembers the tears dropping onto his cheeks.
Mm-hmm.
That was his healing.
Wow.
Because his whole life he could never understand why his mom never loved him and why she gave him up. And when he got to that understanding of remembering, and you see, the soul has memory, the cells in the body have memory.
Yeah,
everything exactly is stored in there. And if we can get good healers, really good healers, and someone you trust who can take you there, it is a very, very, very healing experience, because then he remembered his sacred contract with God, with his mother, with this world, with himself, and he then let the pain go. You see, the pain then just dissolved. And his life, I still have contact with him. That was probably 12 or 13 years ago now. I still have contact with him. And he has changed completely since that. So it's really, I think, each person is so individual and so unique. And each person's life path is so unique and so individual to them, that each person just needs to remember that they are loved infinitely by God. They've come here as an experience, a human experience. It does not define you. And that is such a key to healing.
No, it was like, I had this person who's praying. I was just like, it was instant. Like, and I think part of me was just really ready for answers. And I think that's a really important component.
Yes.
You've got to be ready for answers, because if you're resistant, they're not going to come. So I was but I tell you what, it caught me, it sideswiped me in a way that was like, whoa, you know, what is happening to me? You know?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
You know, like,
I never had anything to eat and drink in a present. I'd swear somebody put something in a drink, you know, or something if I'd had it, because it was just the weirdest experience. But it was really good. It was meant for me. And I also believe that not everybody's meant to have the same experience. We'll have different experiences for different reasons. But I was able to share it with a friend who was also adopted. They had a similar experience. He was adopted in another country and horrifically abused. And he also had a very similar experience. And I believe that because we had these big question marks about why we were what seemed to be rejected by our mothers, God answered that in a way that we needed to hear it that way. Not everybody needs to
Exactly.
hear it that way. I had to hear it that way for me to get it.
Exactly. And you said something which is so, it is key
Yep.
is that you have to be ready
Oh, definitely.
to hear. It's like you got to be ripe, it's like you got to just, and that's why a lot of people, and resistance comes, obviously resistance is caused through fear, right?
Yeah.
So if that has been, as you say, pre-verbal, if if you have had that experience pre-verbally and you've just had horrible human encounters as a
Mm.
child from adults and everyone else, naturally it's going to be a very, very hard thing to let those resistances down because um, trust is not there. There's
Yeah.
no trust in anyone else. And if you don't have that trust, you're going to be
Yeah.
lost. And the
Yeah.
first thing that we have to do is get back to that spiritual connection with
Mm.
God,
Yep.
source, creator, divine
Yep.
creator, whatever people choose to call it. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not religious. I respect everyone has their own denominations.
Yeah.
But I do believe there is one
Yeah.
creator that has
Yeah.
created us all,
Yeah.
and we are loved, adored,
Mm.
absolutely honored for the humans that we are. We are seen to be the bravest of brave souls that come down and
Yeah.
experience these crappy
Yeah.
experiences.
Yeah.
And that's what I can just tell everyone who's experiencing this, is that you are loved. You are
Mm.
loved by God in the most powerful and divine way. And if
Mm.
you can surrender to that,
Yeah.
God will show you your healing.
Yeah.
You will be guided.
Yeah.
Healing is available to every person, every single being. And
Yeah.
healing doesn't mean you're
Yeah.
broken. Healing simply means we get ourselves back into balance. So,
Yes.
and that's what I want to say. It's just such an incredible time for us to have these discussions and have
Yeah.
these things made available to us. But it's amazing.
Yeah.
So yeah, it really is about
Yeah.
that spiritual
Oh,
connection, and
definitely.
you'll be guided.
Yeah. 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 So yeah, and that's kind of, where I want to kind of go with tonight, because I just passed my 60th birthday. I just had my 60th birthday. I'm very
Wow.
sad. I didn't think I'd get past 18, let alone 60. Oh my goodness.
Congratulations, Kerri.
No,
That is amazing.
I know. It's really funny. I've kind of turned 60 and I think something's happened. I don't know what it is. I haven't figured it out yet. But something's happened. And I'm not sure. Like, it's good. And I suppose things will evolve as they go on for me. But there's an awakening or awareness that I've come into, that I haven't quite put my finger on yet, but I quietly had a birthday, and birthdays aren't really that fantastic for adopted people because it comes with so much trauma and grief. And I had to think about what I'd like to share, and I've shared some of my story with you about being adopted, taken at birth from my mother who didn't want to adopt me out. And I was adopted out to a couple where I was used as child slave labour in charcoal pits. And I don't know if people understand what charcoal pits are. I know that my very, very first interview with you, I tried to explain it. And
Maybe explain it again if you don't mind, just
okay,
for our
so
new viewers.
their big hole is dug in the ground. You could stick a small sedan into it, and it's filled with logs, and those logs are laid a particular way so the whole pit is vented, and there's tin placed over the top, then sand, and then it's lit and then completely covered, and the wood breaks down into charcoal. And sometimes when you open it up, about 7 or 8 days, it's opened up, and you'll get big lumps of charcoal like coal, and then you have the smaller, finer stuff. And when I started working in the pits, I reckon I was about 5, and I just had to stand with my brother and hold a corn sack. And then can you imagine, I was really little, so it was up here. So I'm this whole pit having to stand with my brother. And I remember standing in the pit with bare feet in the hot sun and having to do that and having no choice. And, you know, like if I kind of didn't stand right or hold the bag up, I was, at first it may have been just a yell at me, but then it started to be very physical and hit me. I remember running away from my adoptive father. I was about 12 because I didn't want to work in the pits, and I ran through a barbed wire fence. And as I turned to look to see where he was, the sun hit my eyes and I just saw this big black shadow, and I fell down, and he just grabbed me. I had really long hair, and he just yanked me to my feet by my hair. And then he had like these army boots on, and he would just kicked and kicked and kicked me until I went back to the pit. So he ended up devising ways to increase production. So he built a sieve system, and it had a big funnel at the top, and he had a backhoe, and he dropped the charcoal into this big sieve system. And then there'd be about 3 layers of different size wires that would break the charcoal up. So the biggest load would come into the pit where we're standing, and we'd have these paper bags that would fill up with the hard charcoal that went to places like, used for barbecues. And the smaller stuff would land into corn sacks that were underneath the sieve, and we'd have to wire it up a new bag, you know, every so often, and it'd get down to almost a fine powder. So, and we would do on a weekend, we do about 3 or 4 pits on a weekend. So I'd be up before sunrise, and late in the evening going to bed, and then having to go to school Monday morning and have worked this whole weekend. And it wasn't a matter of just working. It was the abuse that came with it. It was being tortured. I was about 8 when my adoptive father poured kerosene on my leg. I didn't know what it was at the time. I was looking out the window, looking at the moon, and just in awe. It was so big. And I felt I had shorts on, and I felt the back of my legs. I thought I had a spider on there. I didn't look because I was so engrossed at looking at the moon. And I felt this feeling at the back of my leg, and I just didn't look down. I just kind of flicked it, thinking it's going to go, and it didn't go. And I looked down, and I saw this flame up my bare leg, and I started hitting at it and becoming quite frantic. And my father was, arm's reach from me, and I'm panicking as a child, going, help me, help me. And at that, he looked at me and he laughed, and then he cupped his hand down the back of my leg, put the flame out, and then he poured the kerosene on the table and lit it, because we had to use a kerosene lantern because we had no electricity where we were. And of course, I was just absolutely aghast at what I was seeing, that he had done this deliberately. And my adoptive mother was a few feet away. And these are the things that he would do. So you imagine, if any people's listening and they remember themselves being 8 or have grandchildren or children still, could you imagine doing that to a child? Just that one thing.
Exactly. That one incident is enough to scar someone for life. I mean, I'm scarred by things my mother said to me when she wouldn't give me enough attention. I'm still scarred by that.
You can't apologize to Mother Chantel.
I think so too. She had 6 of us, okay? I needed more attention.
When you hear stories of people going, I had to walk to school, 3 Ks to catch the bus, and then you hear something, well, you think you had it hard. I had to walk, 6 Ks
Sure.
through the snow, you know what I mean? And I go, and you think you had it hard, like, you want to hear something? Yeah. So,
but there's something I want to just ask you, just going back to what you were saying earlier on. two things actually. I want to know, I mean, child labor is really illegal, right? So, how did they get away with doing this with you guys? Was there no one that knew? I understand there's a big underground operation of these creeps that operate together, but
Yeah.
surely there had to be someone at some point that understood this was wrong. I'm really just looking more at the adults here. Was there no one
No.
in these situations who could help you? Did they
No.
know it was going on?
Well,
Was it
people knew we worked in the charcoal pits. I don't know if they overly saw the abuse, a lot of the horrific abuse, and nobody saw what the adoptive mother was doing, right? And a lot of it was real mental. That's the stuff that's affected me the most. All the physical stuff, not so much. It's the mental stuff that's been the hardest for me to get
yeah,
through. And there were people around, they knew we worked in the pits. My way of seeing it is that nobody really cared because we were throwaway children. We're adopted children. So we kind of didn't deserve any better. So we should be grateful for a roof over our heads. Now, the worst thing that was told to me, and I kind of envisaged the fact that this is how rest of society kind of felt in essence about children like myself. The adoptive mother, I remember telling me as soon as I could comprehend that we were unwanted and nobody wanted us. So if we didn't comply and do what we were told, we would go where unwanted children would go. And that was a home. She just said a home.
weren't you also but you had a club foot, didn't you? I think I
Yeah,
remember last week you saying you
yeah,
had a club foot, so you were graded
yeah.
as
They categorised a B grade baby. And red hair. So red hair was, so she said, so what she said to us was that you would go to this home where you'd be chained to a bed with no mattress, locked in a room, be beaten every day, stripped naked, have rats crawl all over you, and be fed bread and water. And that was told to me from the earliest age possible. And that probably impeded me from ever telling anybody what was happening, because I had this intense fear of being sent away to an even more horrific place. So you can imagine, like I was 4 being told that this story of being adopted by them because my mother tried to kill me as a baby and abort me and didn't want me. They took me out of pity. And by the way, if it doesn't work out here, this is where you're going. So there was no, in essence, let's run away. Let's go and ask for help. Why would I go and ask for help if removing me meant I was going to go somewhere worse? And it really instilled in me that all the bystanders were in on what was happening in essence. Like, when you look back now, no, they weren't participating, but they didn't care enough to get involved and tell me that there were loving families, or there was a better option, or if I did go to the police, I wouldn't end up somewhere like that, But I was so terrified that I never told. Well, I tried to once. I was in grade 9 and I had been kicked out of the house for the weekend, and I wasn't allowed in to get food or anything, and I had to sleep in the bush with no blanket, no food or anything, and wait for my adoptive father to go to work very early Monday morning, crawl back home. I had to catch the bus at 6:30 in the morning. So I had to go home, try and get myself ready, and I had no sports uniform. My adoptive mother didn't wash it, and it was compulsory to have it first thing Monday morning. So all the grade 9s are sitting up on the oval, and all the teachers call out, if you don't have your sports uniform on, you better have a good excuse or you're getting in trouble, like huge trouble. And of course, I just put my hand up and yelled out, getting out of home, kicked out of home good enough for you? Like, really? Like, this is my incredulous self going, really? I'm going to get punished for something that was done to me. And I realised the minute I'd said it that I should never have said it. And I a teacher pulled me to the side and got quite concerned. And straight out, because this image in my head, I'm going to be sent away, I'm going to go to a far worse place. I then thought, I'll cop any consequence. It's not true. Right? That's how I handled it, because I could see this concern on her face. And I just said, no, it's not true. I was just joking. That's how bad it was. That's how conditioned I was not to tell a soul. And
where are these people now? Your adoptive parents? Where are they now? I mean, are they still around?
No,
I mean, were they ever held accountable? What happened after? How did you get out of there?
Well, this is a funny story, Chantel. With my this might blow people away, but I was able to forgive my adoptive father and help him to accept God in his life. And I was how old would I have been? This was kind of before he died. Like, so I had stopped contact for about 3 years, and I had thought I don't want anything to do with them. I'd gone through sporadic periods. I hadn't remembered all the abuse. I remembered enough to go, I can't deal with this, and they're not nice people, and I don't want to expose my children to them. Anyway, I'd had no contact for 3 years, and I get a call from a relative saying that he'd had a heart attack about 3 or 4 times and he's nearly died. You need to go to the hospital. And I'm like, nah. No, I was sort of like, well, the man can die, But I basically had started my walk with the Lord, and so I got a call over 3 days, come to the hospital, like he may not live. And after about 3 days, I started to feel a little bit, I could feel something gnawing at me. Anyway, I decided to put the thing to prayer, and I'm going, oh God, I don't want to go. This man, you know what he's done to me. He's done horrific things to me. Why do I have to go to him? Right? He could, any opportunity to come to me. And so anyway, all I could see was an image of Christ with his arms outstretched going, yeah, but how much have I forgiven you? Right? And I mean, look, I'm no saint. So that's all I could see. And I'm like, oh, okay. And this is an important part of the story, because I know you interviewed someone recently about forgiveness. And so I think this might be a little important to add into it. I could not forgive my adoptive father, not in my own self. There's no way, Jose, that I could force myself or even try and attempt and cajole myself into forgiving my adoptive father. It was never going to happen. But this is what I did. I turned around and I had a prayer, and I said, God, I can't forgive him, but I know that you can work on my heart, so I can. I give you my heart, and I'll let you take control. I give you permission. Beautiful. Right? I give you permission to work on me. Cried myself to sleep, because I couldn't think of the worst thing I could forgiving
this man. Ever have, was your memories ever blocked out? Were you involved? Was this SRA as well? Were your memories blocked out? Did you start retrieving memories, or was there anything like this? So you always were aware that he was abusive? It's not like...
No, I blocked a lot out. I blocked so much out, it's not funny. And I can tell you today, I still haven't remembered it all. Right?
Yeah.
So I felt that for me, and I'm not saying this for everybody, and I don't want to tell this story to put any undue pressure or expectations on anybody. This was where I was at. It's like God talking to me and showing me, that I didn't want to be born, right? So it's kind of the same thing, and it was that sort of surrendering and going, I'm willing for you to work on my heart, whatever it be will come, right? So I cried myself to sleep, woke up the next morning, it was like a new me. And I looked at my heart. As soon as he saw my face, he says, you want to go and see your father? And I said, yes, I do. Now, the important part of the story is I went expecting nothing from my adoptive father, absolutely nothing, because he's given me nothing. He's never bought me a gift. If my adopted mother bought me anything, anybody else did, he'd take it and destroy it. So this man's never said a kind word to me, never lifted me up, never made me feel good, right? So I expected nothing back. And that was important, that I go and feel as if I was not being a hypocrite. That was my biggest thing. I didn't want to go and say, I hope you get better. But in my mind and my body, I'm going, yeah, right, you know, pigs might fly. I don't want you to get better. I didn't want to go. I wanted to go and say, I forgive you, I hope you get better, and mean it. So a real miracle had actually occurred in my sleep. So I got up the next morning, went to the hospital, and he was in the ICU. The nurses were in the centre station, and I wasn't sure exactly where he was. I stood at the door, scanned the room to see where he was, and I spotted him across the room, and lo and behold, he actually sat up a bit to see me. And I walked across the room, and he had all these wires hooked up, and he's holding out his hand. I'm going to try and not get emotional here. He's reaching out to me. Now, I get to the bed, and I grabbed his hand, and I didn't say a word. He said, I am sorry. I am sorry for being a mongrel to you and hurting you so much. I'm sorry. And I, like, you would think somebody would go, yeah, and so you should be. You know what I said? I said, it's all right. It just came so naturally. And then anybody that came near the bed, and this was the weird part, anyone that came near the bed, he would introduce me to. This man never introduced me to anybody because he was just ashamed of me as his daughter. But any nurse that came near the bed, he'd say, this is my daughter, this is my daughter, right? And I thought, this is the weirdest thing, like the weirdest thing that's occurred. But anyway, so over time, he gets out of hospital. He has a triple bypass. And he rings me one day as he's getting better, and he says, I want to come and visit you and take you out for your birthday and buy you something. He's never bought me anything, not a thing. He would complain about feeding and clothing me. My adoptive mother would have to steal money to buy a birthday present. This is how bad it was. And he's saying, I want to buy you a birthday present. So he comes up, takes me out, and I'm into art, so he buys me some art stuff. Yeah. And then he goes, we're standing in the street, and he goes, I'll take you to lunch. And, of course, he goes, I'll take you to the pub. And I'm not a pub, because of all the drinking and abuse I grew up with, there's no way I wanted to go to the pub. But I'm like, I'm not looking a gift horse in the mouth. I didn't say a word, and his foot had not hit the road. And he swung round, and he goes, oh, that's right, you don't like pubs. Let's find a cafe. And I'm just like going, what? So we go to a cafe. Anyway, over a few weeks, finally I decided to go visit, because it would have been Christmas by this stage. I thought, finally I'll go over and spend some time with him. He takes me out fishing. This man used to swear at me. He pulls a crab pot up, he hurts himself, he swears, and then swings around and says, oh, I'm sorry for swearing. And I'm like, beam me up, Scotty. What has happened to this man? This is not normal. And then I remember I was playing some music, some Christian music. He'd come in at 6 o'clock. Normally he'd just be gruff, turn the news on, get out of my way. So when he walked in the house, I went to turn the music off. He goes, no, leave it on. That sounds great. And I'm just going, this is really weird. Then come dinner time, right, and I would just have quiet prayer to myself, right? He stops everything. He goes, can you please say grace? And I'm like going, because I could see my adopted mother really agitated. Like, she's like, hell no, I'm not into this at all. And I'm like, looking, goes, all right, Dad, I can just say it to myself. He's like going, no, I would really love you to say it. And I'm like, okay. So I could hear the adopted mother the whole time hitting plates and cups and doing whatever she could do. So anyway, Christmas Day, you know how you cook the pork and you do everything, right? And he was a big cook, right? He was a really good cook. Anyway, at that stage, I wasn't eating meat at all. And I didn't want to say anything to him because I thought, he's just being so giving. I don't want to, like, say anything. I'll just accept everything as a beautiful gift, right? Anyway, he's in the kitchen. He pulls out the pork. and it's all sizzling away, and he's basting it and everything. And he's saying how beautiful it'll be. But then he looks at me, he says, "It's all right, love, I know you don't eat pork. I've cooked you a heap of vegetables." And I'm thinking, oh, okay, I bet you the vegetables are soaking in the pork juice. So anyway, next minute he goes, "Oh, no, here's the vegetables here." Because that's right, they were sitting, the vegetables were around pork. Right? So next week he pulls out a tray that's totally separate from the pork. He said, "These ones are yours." I'm having a meltdown by this stage. And he had no idea, like, what I went through to go to the hospital. He's oblivious to all the trauma he's caused me. And I'll tell you that most abusers are. They have no idea, right? So while you're tearing yourself up with drugs and alcohol and wanting to kill yourself, they're just living their merry little life, right?
Yeah,
so
that's normal for them.
Yeah, so I'm in this, like, what has happened? And, you know, eventually, over time, I was able to understand why my father threw God out. And as he tells me the story, that when he was a boy, like, because his father had taken off, left his mum with a heap of children, they were dirt poor. He was the oldest, and the mum had given him some money to go to the butcher's to buy some mince. It was Good Friday, and so that's all she had. So he goes to the butcher's and asks for mince, and the butcher refused to serve him. He said, "No, it's Good Friday, you have to buy fish." So my father, as a little boy, hung on to this bitterness and anger towards God. So when I found that out, because he said, "Oh, what has God done for me?" So there was my opportunity. Well, let me tell you what he's done for you. When you were dying, I didn't want to come and see you. And here's my reasons why. And I said, if I had not prayed, if I had not had God in my life, I would not be in your life. He actually gave you an opportunity to have your daughter back and have a relationship, a decent one with me. That's what he's done for you, right? So over the years, he actually ended up having a stroke and a stroke and a brain tumor, and he was at his end of days. And I remember going to the hospital, and I would feed him. I would massage his feet, his legs, because he was in pain, and I would sing songs to him, Christian songs to him. And probably a couple of days before he died, I asked him, would he accept Christ into his heart? And he said yes. So that to me was an amazing journey. It took years to get to that point where he did, but the relationship never returned back to the abuse and the havoc that it was. And I see forgiveness as a process. I see it that, because, you know, even after that period, I had even more memories of abuse from him. And I have to make a conscious choice each time that happens to forgive him over and over again. Right?
Yeah.
Because those things will occur, because, you know, and I do that for myself, because if I hang on to the bitterness and the anger and the resentment, I'm going to be the one that suffers for it in the long run. And I see that with so many victims. And I did it myself, drove myself into the dirt working. I started drinking at 13. I was being suicidal. You know, like, these are things we do to ourselves, because even though our abuser's not actually physically in our life, we choose to bring them in because we believe everything that they said and did to us.
Okay.
Yeah, I actually see it as honouring them. We honour what they have told us about ourselves, that we are worthless, we are nothing, and that we're garbage and whatever, right? So we actually honour that by hurting ourselves. And I remember when I was a youth worker for years, and I had kids doing terrible things to themselves, and they'd say, "Oh, I hate my father, he did this really aggressively and I hate him." And I go, "No, you don't, you love him." And they go, "No, I hate him." They go, "No, you love him, and you honour everything he has said to you, that you're garbage and you're nothing." And you see these kids get really angry. And I said, when you take on everything that they've said, that you're garbage and nothing. So you're taking the drugs and the alcohol and everything. You're actually honoring everything they say about you. So you actually love him. And you,
Exactly. And you're giving him exactly what he wants from you.
yes. So
Yeah.
I've seen quite a few kids actually change the direction of their life the minute I've said that. Because I said, why believing everything that they've said and done to you? If you hate them so much, be the opposite of what they've said. And
Exactly. Very,
yeah,
very wise. That's extremely wise what you've said. Turn it on its head and believe exactly the opposite of what they've made you believe. And I
yeah.
can't help but ask, what happened to Mama Bear, your adoptive mom?
All right. So I stopped contact with Mama Bear for many more years. Actually 8 or 9 in total, because the mental abuse and a lot of what she did was harder for me to deal with, and she was still abusive even as an adult. And in 2016, I got a call from my adoptive sister saying she was very concerned about the adoptive mother, wasn't well kept, very thin and grey, and thought she was suicidal. So I actually went down, knocked on the door, and this woman was really vile to me. But I could see that she was incredibly unwell. And so my sister and I devised a plan, and we actually got her picked up and put into hospital with the hope that they would deal with mental health issues. And I remember going to the hospital, and she's straight in, you did this to me, tell me you did this to me, really aggressively. And the staff had told me to not tell her I did it. So I lied and said, no, I didn't do it. And she's like, you're a Christian, you got to tell the truth, and you did this to me. And I'm like, all right. I said, and I said, all right, Mum, what if I did this to you and I admit to it, what will you do? She goes, I'd wipe you. You know, again, get out, don't come back. And I said, well, I didn't do it. And you could see the look on her face going, that's it. So anyway, I had to get a mask, and I had peppermint oil, and I had to get into her house, and I was horrified what I saw. The house was locked up with all cyclone, they're like blind things on the outside of the house. There was no airflow. There was a cat. The kitty litter was full. There was cat poo and wee all over the floor and the benches. She had no food in the house, and every plate and cup and spoon and saucepan was in the fridge and the freezer. And so it broke my heart. Found a rifle in her bedroom. She threatened to kill my sister with a shooter a couple of years back, but there were no bullets, so this is what she would do. So while she was in hospital for a couple of weeks, a friend of mine decided to go to the house and clean it. So while this woman's being exceptionally abusive to me still, I couldn't let her go back home to that. And as sick as I was and unwell as I was with my fractured spine and autoimmune problems, I spent hours. And I remember on my hands and knees scrubbing this floor that this cat had urinated and pooped all over. And then I went into the bathroom, and I don't think it had been flushed for weeks. And I'm cleaning the toilet. And the weirdest thing happened. I walked out of the toilet and went to talk to my friend. And I said, do you know what? I don't feel any resentment. I don't feel any, like, you know, I don't feel any bitterness or anger or whatever towards her. There was such freedom in it. And,
Yeah.
you know, I really wanted her to get help, but right up until the very end, she sat in the car beside me. Once she got out of hospital, and I took her to the social worker and to a GP, and she was attacking me in the car straight away. Like when I picked her up, and she was like, I'm going to divorce you kids, in a really aggressive way. You've been the worst thing I ever did. I've hated, you know, I hate you kids and just want you out of my life. And we're all trying to help her, right, at this stage. And this is 2016. And I turned around and I said, well, you're going to divorce me. Well, that's good. I'd like that to happen. I've actually been and looked into that. It's called discharge. You have to go to the Supreme Court. You might have to pay anything up to $40,000. And I said, I think it's a great idea because I'll get the chance to tell my story in front of a magistrate. But I said it in such a calm, so I agree with you. Let's do it. You know, like, it's cool. And it kind of just took the wind out of her. But I remember, you know, dropping off at the house, and she started attacking me, saying, your father didn't do this or that. And I said, yes, he did. And this is abuse. And I had my sister in the car with me, and she backed me up. And then she was like, oh, I just want to be with your father, and I don't want to ever see you again. And I was like, well, that's not what we want. So I knew she was suicidal, but there was nothing we could do. We had done our best. Nobody was interested. The attitude was, she's an adult, let her do what she likes. But the weirdest thing was having the family meeting at the hospital about her, and she had assessments and everything, and she actually abused me a couple of times in front of the staff. And the social worker said to me, don't ever be alone with her, Kerri. And I'm like, I'm an adult. Like, I'm an adult now, and you're telling me not to be alone with her. I was a child with that. I was a child. And I just had to laugh about it. I just thought it was, what could you say to that? Don't be alone with her. I'm an adult. I can defend myself physically.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's a bit late for that now.
I know. So, but anyway, she got out of the car. I watched her walk into the house, and I just knew that was the last day I was going to see her. She was dead about 4 weeks later. So she just starved herself to death. So here, I don't know what childhood she had. I don't know what happened to her. I know there were a couple of times I really tried to get her help, and that was my last-ditch effort. And I knew that I had done everything in my power for her. And I feel good in the essence that I did what I could, and there's no regrets. And I could have chose to stay away and just let her reap whatever, but she was a human being. I don't know what happened to her as a child to turn out the way she did, and I don't know what inner monsters she was having to deal with. But it was sad. She got given 4 beautiful children that she could have had a beautiful life with, and she just destroyed it. And, you know, she was trying to destroy me even right near the end, but she didn't.
Yeah. I think it's wonderful, you know, such a beautiful story of forgiveness and overcoming what you've experienced here with them. And, you know, just when you look at the way she lived, the way you explained, it tells me the hell that she put herself in, you know, she really did. And, you know, there's no ways that someone coming from that background, or having a woman especially perpetuating such atrocities on her children, even if they aren't her biological children, chances are, you know, she was probably adopted herself and was pretty damn abused too. So it's just a cycle that continues, and it's beautiful to see that you've actually ended that cycle. And I really, really, really commend you for that, because this is not easy, as I said.
No. And like I say, I'll probably have memories of her. I've had terrible nightmares, and, you know, I've got to work through it still. I've got to work through whatever comes. And, you know, I love how God sends certain people into my life that I might need at the time, you know, that have a word to say to me, or some encouragement, or help me just kind of verbalize so I can nut it. I like to work at my own stuff. And, you know, I just really love how that happens. The timing is so beautiful, especially in the last few years. It's been incredible. And it, you know, what I've experienced reminds me of the story of Joseph, because somehow we got North Birthrights, but, you know, Joseph found the Bible when we're born. Like, you know, they had a status, like they had this in their family. It was so important, and I had that torn from me. Like, I should have been the 4th child, the 5th child to my mother, you know, and the only girl child in the family, and that was stripped from me. And, you know, even though Joseph wasn't adopted, he was sold into slavery. He was thrown into a pit, like I was thrown into a pit.
By who?
By his brothers. So we talk about Joseph and the Bible. So his brothers, he had this coat. So he had this coat on that signified his status in the family and his birthright. So when they actually took the coat off him, there's a word that was used called flayed, right? So they actually flayed off his birthright and told him that he was nothing. He was unimportant. And then they threw him in the pit, right? And that pit is, to me, the same pit that I was thrown into, and my mother was thrown into, this pit of death, because, you know, the pit was where they used to throw the carcass into, right? So in that, and then they pull him out, and his own family, brothers, sell him off to slavery. Now, I know that my mum, my biological mum, had family. Nobody stood by her, right? Nobody supported her. So it kind of mirrors the same sort of thing. And I'm sent off to go work in charcoal pits. And the interesting story about Joseph is that, you know, he goes through a similar story to myself, in the essence of, you know, he goes off to Egypt and he becomes a slave, and he ends up being second in the highest in land to Pharaoh. And there becomes the famine, and his brothers show up, and he eventually discloses who he is to his brothers. And his brothers think, oh my goodness, like, he's the second highest in the land, he's going to kill us, right, for what we did to him. But Joseph actually cries, all the grief comes out, so all of Pharaoh's house hears him. And it's interesting, how big do you think Pharaoh's house was? So that's saying it's okay to grieve over all that loss. That's what he held in all those years. And as he grieves, and the brothers are going, oh, he's going to kill us. And he goes, no, no, no. What you did to me was meant for evil, but God turned it for good, right? Because Joseph ended up saving millions of lives. And I think about that in respect to my own story, is that everything that was done to me was meant for evil. But because I've accepted Christ in my life and I'm willing for him to work in me, I'm able to turn it around for good.
Yeah.
You know?
Transmute it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. So
absolutely. It's what I call the true alchemy of the soul, the spirit.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
So
I
wanted to show you, because a lot of people don't know this. All right, here. So when you're adopted, you get given so many. So I got an extract in here somewhere. Where is it? There it is. So, all right. So when you're adopted, I can't show you the number, so I'll hold them. So I get something like an extract, right? And my birth certificate, it's an extract. Has no birth name on it. Just basically my name, my date of birth, right? A number. So I'm given a number. Right. So then we're issued a new birth certificate now. So with our adopted parents' names on it. And we're given a record of our adoption. Again, I'll just cover that. So we're given a record of adoption, but we're given a certificate, a birth certificate that says, so here I got another one. Here's another birth certificate with my adopted parents as my biological parents, right? So anyway, so I've got 3 lots. That's not the end of it. Apparently, I had an original birth certificate. So anyway, I had to apply, and you could adoptees couldn't apply for these until a few years back to get your original birth certificate. So my original birth certificate makes me the mother, no, makes me the child of immaculate conception. I do not have a father.
Wow.
So this was banned. I was banned from this. Adopted people were never allowed their original birth certificate. And my father's name. Yeah, so the original birth certificate does not have my father's name on it. And so my mum knew who my dad was. And back then, they didn't put the father's names on. So for 2 reasons, because they don't change their name by marriage, so they're easier to find. And it also hid the father's sins if the men were very important. But fancy leaving off the father's name deliberately on your birth certificate. So this is what I have to do. Oh, this is the life of an adoptee. So I have to fill out a form, right, and get a DNA test from my father and submit it and hope that they accept it.
Wow.
So I've got...
It really is birth loss. You're right. It's birth loss, right?
It's huge. Like, you know, a birth certificate is supposed to reflect the truth about who you are. You know, like your biological DNA tree. And not only do they not give you the original birth certificate, they withhold information from it. And the interesting part is, it said a person who unlawfully alters a certificate issued by the Registry of Births, Marriages or Deaths, whether by erasure, obliteration, removal, addition, or otherwise, is guilty of a crime and liable to the punishment by law.
Isn't that what?
Except if you are somebody who is stealing children for adoption, you can go ahead and you can do whatever you like.
Exactly. You're the biggest criminal of the lot, and now you threaten others with criminal offenses. I mean, I find that very, very...
But they should be held account for the criminal withholding.
Of course.
So I have a birth certificate that says that my adoptive parents are my biological parents. Now, I've just read out that you're not supposed to add or take away anything but the truth and nothing but the truth.
So help me God. Not for them.
Correct. So apparently I have adoptive parents as my biological parents. And you wonder why adopted people feel like their life is a lie.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
What we've asked for is the truth, and that is our original birth certificate with our father's names on it, and in what we call integrated birth certificates or integrated certificates to say that the adopted parents are now the parents but not the birth parents. The truth, transparency and truth.
Just leave it as is. This is my birth certificate. These are my adopted parents. Bang.
Correct. Yes.
Let's just keep it simple. Why all the rigmarole?
Yeah.
Well, Kerri, I have thoroughly enjoyed our conversation again today and out of time again. But look forward to having you back in 2 weeks' time. So I want to say to our viewers, please just tune in again Friday, 2 weeks' time. We're making this a regular slot with our focus on Australia with Kerri Saint, who's going to be bringing us more information on these atrocities, and not just Australia, but I think worldwide this is a problem. But Australia, I think it's so prevalent because, you know, we've always been led to believe that Australia is such a well-run, slick, beautiful country and everything, you know, is so good there. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, the underbelly is horrific. It's the headquarters for Tavistock Mind Control. The amount of evil that exists there by these people that are running the show is on another level. So I look forward to you bringing forth some more topics for us to discuss, what's happening down under, and hopefully that's all going to be on the top now. All the down under is coming up to the top. We're going to see it all. Kerri, thank you. God bless you. Thank you. Is there anything else you'd like to say to our viewers before we bid you farewell?
I just want to say that I really appreciate the encouragement from your listeners and some of the beautiful things that they say. And it really encourages me to keep telling my truth and so openly like this. And I just wish them all the best and thank them for your joining in for these little chats that we're having, and I appreciate it very much.
Thank you so much. They're so cool. You know, and I love comments. So guys, just leave a comment. If any of you have some adoptive stories you'd like to share with us, I actually think it might be nice to actually open the platform at some point to Like we did with the overcomers of SRA, we want to maybe look at doing that, yeah, with people who've been adopted. You can tell us your story, how it was for you, if you want to share. I think that might be a nice one to broach. So if you're interested in that, you can send me an email, Kerri as well. We can put the email addresses in the comment. Are we able to put your email address in the comment, Kerri? Comment
Yeah,
section?
yeah. If anybody's got any specific questions they'd like me to answer
Yes.
one about, I'm more than happy to do that. So
Great. Well, Thea will leave both my email as well as Kerri's email in the comment section. So if you guys are wanting to talk, share your story with Kerri and myself, we'd actually love to hear you and what you have to say and share. And especially if it's healing, it can be facilitating to everyone else. And even if you think it's not, it doesn't matter. It's your story. Okay, guys, God bless you all. Mwah. Take care of yourselves. And we look forward to seeing you very, very soon again. Thanks for tuning into our focus on Australia. Very important focus that we have there. We'll see you very, very soon. Mwah. Take good care.